Wow.
about the pig. I was laughing the whole way through. It was, because she wasn't talking about the woman's husband. This was a real pig. Anyways, I thought that was a funny story, but it's a lesson to always check Facebook. Yes.
Absolutely. One of the things I've started doing is I've started asking their references, does so-and-so have a pet or does so-and-so smoke? Because I feel like their references will be sort of caught off guard by that kind of question and will at least answer honestly. Anything else that you would suggest asking their references, the people who aren't landlords, but because usually when people give you the references, it's their friends. So, what kinds of questions do you think you could ask their friends to sort of trip them up to see what kind of tenant they are?
Yeah, it's a good question. A nice one again is to say, "Tell me about them," and see how they answer.
Okay, that's a good one.
Tell me about them. It's a good answer to ask them to see if they volunteer anything.
Yeah.
About that, I want to ask them, would you lend them money? If they were short. You lend them money.
Oh, that's a good one.
Have you lent them money?
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are some questions I would ask. To me, friends, I'm always wary about references from friends. Employers are different. Getting a pay stub is very important.
Yeah.
Send me the last pay stub showing you got paid for work. If they don't want to show you this, ask them to show you their last bank statement showing money going into their account.
Okay.
You want to see that there's money going into their account on a regular basis so they have money to pay you. That's also very important. The ability to pay is the most important. And there are some, and depending on the properties you have, there are some excellent property managers who qualify all tenants. And in some cases, they even guarantee the rent, that if it's their tenant that doesn't pay, they guarantee the rent. Now, you got to pay the property manager a fee, but then you don't have to deal with the tenants if they call with a broken toilet at 11 o'clock at night. So depending on how many properties you own, usually by the time you have 4 tenants, I would seriously consider getting a property manager to do all this for you, because they know how to properly qualify all tenants.
Right.
And they have a list of tenants, who are looking for properties too in their database. So, a good property manager is somebody an investor should always put on their team as well.
Right. No, that definitely makes sense. I mean, it's funny. You just mentioned you don't want to get the 11 o'clock call at night about the plumbing, but I've been a landlord for a while, and I always hear that as an argument why people don't want to become landlords. And I'm like, listen, nobody ever calls you at 11 or 2 o'clock in the morning to complain about plumbing because they're sleeping. They will call during the day to complain about those things, and then you'll send over a plumber. You won't necessarily be at their house at 2 o'clock in the morning dealing with it, but I just think it's always interesting that everybody goes to that. I mean, for me, I certainly manage.
Well, it's not just that. If the rent is late, sometimes you'll feel very uncomfortable. They say, well, I'm working late. You want to come to get the rent? And
yes.
You can come meet me at 10 o'clock at night. And you don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And you understand. And so by having a property manager, you don't have to deal with any of that. They collect the rent. They deal with everything. You don't have to. And so I appreciate for the first time investor, you may not have the budget to afford that, but very soon you'll see the benefits of having a very good property.
Got it. Now, when it comes to the housing market, the super competitive housing market in Toronto, are there any things that you would recommend that someone purchasing a house in Toronto should know from a real estate legal perspective?
Well, if you're in a bidding war, there's a couple of things you have to know. Many people are making offers without any conditions. And, you should consider having the home inspected even before you make an offer. Pay for an inspection. At least then you can make an offer without conditions, and you're not going to be sabotaged by finding problems after closing if you're successful.
Right.
Yes, you could lose the money of the inspection, but what I've told people is to make a deal with the home inspector that if you're on 2 or 3 bidding wars before you win, they charge a little less for every second or third home inspection. And I've seen many home inspectors make deals like that. And also the buyers become very good. Once you walk through 2 home inspections with a home inspector, I'm sure you're the belt.
Yeah.
You could almost do a home inspection yourself. You've gone through so many of these with inspectors. You yourself subconsciously know what to look for, both inside and outside the house. Yes, you're not an inspector, but it's amazing how fast people get educated on what to look for, whether it's the plumbing, what to look for, electrical, what to look for in the box. The eaves troughs, are they pointing towards the basement, which means you're getting water going into the foundation. There's certain things that you start to become very educated yourself. So it's not a waste. So that's number one. You need a home inspection anyways. Number two, you got to be very careful about how much you bid, because you're going to be pre-approved by the bank. So you're going to know how much the bank will lend you. But if you bid and win a bidding war, the bank is still going to do an appraisal. Mm-hmm. And if they think you paid too much, they're going to lend you less money, and you may not have enough money then to close. So you have to be very careful not to bid up to the absolute maximum you can possibly afford, or you could be having a struggle. So you got to make sure that, the price makes sense. You might even need to have a little bit more of a down payment in reserve in case that happens. I've seen that happen 3 times in the last 6 months where buyers could not afford the home because the bank came in with a lower appraisal. So those are 2 of the key things to watch for when you're buying in Toronto, I think, in this bidding war type climate. Those are the 2 main things to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there any sort of bidding war clauses that you would suggest that people incorporate into their agreements?
The only in one of my books, Real Estate Sales, I have a couple of books. One for buyers and sellers is Put the Pen Down, and it's available on our website. But the only time you need a bidding war clause is if you're suspicious that there's no other offer coming in. But really, if you are suspicious, I would just present the offer in person to make sure that whether or not there's anybody else present. There's really not much you can do when there are a whole bunch of buyers. You really have to work with an agent that has a lot of experience handling the bidding war process, because, good agents know how to talk to the listing agent. They can gather there's some information. There's no real rules here. There's no real clauses. You just have to work with somebody who's had some experience winning bidding wars for their clients, because there's a lot of psychology. There's a lot of emotion at the end of the evening. A lot of successful buyers do videos, and they put it on the iPhone, and the agent shows it to the seller.
Yes.
Why this property is important to the family. Any little thing you can do will help you.
Yes, I've certainly done the video before. I've shown up with a letter from my clients and sort of read that out. But sometimes I find the market in Toronto is becoming so competitive that sometimes the sellers really just care about the dollar amount. Now, that being said, a couple of months ago, I did lose out on a house, and I did find out after the fact that the reason why we lost was because the person who did win it did have a very good sort of rationale. The woman of the household was in an accident, and she needed the pool in the backyard to be able to do some rehab, and so they chose to sell their house to her, which is completely understandable.
Trust me, Devel. The only time a letter helps is if the 2 offers are the identical price.
Yes.
If that offer was less, trust me, the letter wouldn't have helped very much. So the letter helps when the prices are barely comparable.
Yes.
And then maybe the seller might look. But as you said, most sellers are extremely greedy, and so they will look for the highest offer. And so you have to be careful. I like I said, I'm a fan of letters and all this other stuff, but most sellers, are going to look for the highest price.
Yes, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense, Mark. Tell us about your real estate. Do you own real estate yourself? What part of the city do you live in?
Yeah, I live in Toronto, and so besides having done thousands of real estate deals over the years, I have some residential homes that I own and rent out. I have mixed residential and commercial, where it's rented out commercial on the main floor, residential on top.
Okay.
And I use a property manager for all of this. I just, number one, I don't want to have the bother, and I don't want people calling me, but it's a wonderful way to build wealth, and I know that what you like to do for first time buyers is, find a property where there's perhaps a basement rental opportunity or some other second unit rental, because that person is helping you pay your mortgage.
Exactly.
And so, and they're helping you with the expenses, and every check you get from them is paying down your mortgage. It's a wonderful way to get into the market, and I know that you've helped many people do that and successfully enter the market, and there's still possibilities to find those kinds of properties, even in Toronto, if you look hard.
Yes, absolutely, for sure. And for first-time home buyers, getting a house that's got a basement apartment in it certainly helps make it affordable. For somebody who's single, it almost helps to act as a second income for them. So I highly recommend getting the basement apartment. For a lot of home buyers, especially with the prices in Toronto becoming so high, I feel like that's how people are going to be able to make it affordable. And I know I do that myself. I have a basement apartment, and it makes a lot of sense, and it certainly helps with the bills for me, absolutely. So, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, and sometimes they may have to look a little bit outside. So as long as you're on a major transit hub, whether it's GO train or highway for a car, then it's also a good investment in case because it'll be less money, might be easier for you to afford, but you're still in the market.
Right.
And for anybody who's nervous about the market, and everybody keeps saying the housing market's going to crash, even though it hasn't crashed for 15 years, I want you to remember that this is still, I think, one of the top 3 destinations in the world for anybody who's living anywhere in the world. We live in a very, stressful world.
Yeah.
And there's issues every day, whether it's now the big story is Britain, all of Europe seems to be scared. And so a place everybody looks for is right here in the GTA. We have more communities here, more languages spoken than anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And that should give people comfort when they're looking into buying real estate. Also, interest rates still are at historic low levels. So you can always lock your mortgage in for 5 years. If the market does start to go down, it'll be back within 5 years. So your payments are guaranteed. So you don't have to be afraid. I know that it's anxious and a lot of people are nervous, but if you remember those things, this is still a great time to get into the market here and to, enjoy the benefits of home ownership. And remember, home ownership is the only tax-free ownership of anything in this country.
Yeah.
If you make a profit owning your home, you'll never pay any income tax.
Yes, that's absolutely true. It makes a lot of sense for me. I wholeheartedly believe it. Obviously, that's why I sell it as well, too. Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us today. It's been awesome. How can people reach you? Where can they find you?
Yes. So my email is mark@realestatelawyers.ca. So that's an easy way to reach me. I have a toll-free number, 1-888-876-5529, or a Toronto line, 416-702-2499.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks so much, Mark, for joining us. And thanks, listeners, for listening to Morrison Report today. And hope to speak to you soon again, Mark. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you very much, Devel.
Okay. Bye.
You've been listening to the Morrison Report. Hosted by Devel Morrison, sales representative for Bosley Real Estate Limited Brokerage, real estate investor and best-selling author, bringing you insights on the Toronto real estate market. Join us for another podcast.